All right. We are in for a treat because sometimes when God gives people a vision, I didn't know that. I'm just going to say where God gives a vision, God makes provision. And I really believe that. And a few years ago, has it been 6 years, 7 years? Joshua knew that he needed to help the people of the restoration to better understand the Torah. And that's why we're here, is because of this man right here and his wonderful family that make this happen every year. So can y'all, before I bring him up, can y'all just say thank you with a big, loudest clap you can give him? All right. And on a personal note, I thought that I was done with my dissertation. I thought I was done. And so my dissertation is the intertextual relationship between the New Testament and the Old Testament. Plain English, how often do the authors of the New Testament quote or make reference to the Old Testament? 1,283 times on my count, or about every 6. So when you're reading your New Testament, every 6 verses. Or if you're reading the book of Revelation, every under 2 verses. So you're not even allowed to, unless you know the Tanakh, the Old Testament, you're not even allowed to open the book of Revelation because it is calculus and you probably are operating with an arithmetic understanding. So I would encourage you to leave that book alone for a minute until you're ready to go. But oh, see, I am easily distracted, and I'm trying not to because I want to hear what Joshua has to say. But the reason why I brought that up is when I thought that I was done, then Joshua said, oh, I've got some, and he would keep on sending me every week or so, he would send me 1 or 2 more things. Oh, I found something else. I found something else. Oh, have you read in the book of Enoch? And I'm just like going, Josh, and I have to say this is awesome because it's doing it. And now that volume is 4 volumes, and hopefully I'll have it edited and ready for distribution before too long. But it was because of this man and his family. Melissa and Charlotte have both been just amazing when they would ask me questions. I hate it when people ask me silly questions like, well, hey, how often did Yeshua, or which book in the Old Testament did Yeshua quote from the most? And I'm just like, I'm gonna leave that story alone. But anyway, there was some lady sitting in the back that asked that question. And it was good because it added 100 verses to my text. And so the answer to the question is, the book of Psalms is the #1 book that Jesus is going to be quoting from. Then Deuteronomy, then Isaiah, then Exodus, in that order. Joshua, not only is he the mastermind of this whole conference, he is a scholar in his own right. I love it when I can sit down and ask him questions. I don't love it so much when his son asks me questions because I can't answer them most of the time. But I love the brilliance. So anytime that I'm at their house, then I know that I'm in a place where I'm probably the dumbest kid in the class. And that's the place I like to be. Because if you ever find yourself in a class and you're the smartest person and you're not the teacher, you're in the wrong class. Get out. You need to be somewhere else. So I love to be at their fellowship because I know that I'm in the right class where I can learn so much. And so now I'm going to invite Joshua to come up to the pulpit and be able to deliver a powerful word of God to us today.
Okay, well, Tracy is mutual, and we're glad to have you there too. And Tracy teaches us plenty too, so and glad to have all of you here too. These are it's nice to be at a place in your life where you can just invite all your favorite people and have them come and be in one room together, and there's no end to interesting and enlightening conversations. So, okay. Today I'm going to talk about, as you can see, blessings and cursings, race and lineage, inheritance in the family of Israel. And as we all know, Mormonism has had a controversial and interesting history regarding race and lineage. And there's definitely not time in 50 minutes. I said an hour there, but that was, even if I had an hour, it would not be enough, obviously. So I'm going to limit myself to only a portion of what could be said, okay, and even only a portion of what's in the book, okay. So I am going to make this mostly scriptural, and we're not going to talk too much about the historical, pioneer day, pioneer time, teachings of the brethren and things like that. Although those are kind of the reason why there's controversy over these things. So, one of the reasons why this is such a big deal, of course, is because with the restored understanding of the importance of family, we know that salvation is not a one-size-fits-all, right? There is what we would call salvation, and even single people can be saved and enter into heaven without any hindrance because of their marital status. But we know that exaltation, on the other hand, is entirely a family matter. And as has been alluded to by some of the other speakers, like exaltation is to join yourself to the exalted family, essentially, right? So section 132, these angels did not abide my law, therefore they cannot be enlarged, but remain separately and singly without exaltation in their saved condition to all eternity. So no problem there, but exaltation is the thing that we're looking for, and exaltation is, as I said, a family matter. Now, when we talk about families, very often we talk about pedigree. Pedigree is, where's my French speaker? Pedigree, it comes from a French phrase, pied de grue, or something like that. Is that pretty good?
Close.
Say it for us.
Pied de grue.
Pied de grue, yeah. Okay, which means foot of the crane. That's like literally what pedigree means. And it comes from like that branching shape of the crane's foot. But if your pedigree gets very large, then it looks less and less like a crane's foot and more like a tree. Right? Yes, sideways tree. So we know God's work and glory is to bring to pass the immortality and eternal life of man. And how does God do that? Well, the scriptures have various allegories and analogies to describe God's work here on the earth. But one of the most prevalent allegories or descriptions of this, metaphors I would say, is that God is a gardener. And his work is gardening, and man, not meaning man singly, but man, like collectively, mankind is his vineyard, and he is working in the vineyard, doing all sorts of interesting things, okay? And this, as I said, this is kind of a persistent metaphor, so we see it in the Torah. Okay, in Exodus chapter 15, thou shalt bring them in, meaning Israel, and plant them in the mountain of thine inheritance. The prophets talk about this, okay, Isaiah. These are just examples. Of course, there's many others, maybe even others are coming to your mind. But for the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the men of Judah his pleasant plant. Okay, in the writings. So this is everything, thank you, everything in the Old Testament or the Tanakh, besides the Torah and the prophets. So all of this is the poetic writings and things like that. So we have in Psalm 80, thou hast brought a vine out of Egypt. Again, we're talking about Israel, and planted it. Thou prepared a room before it, and did cause it to take deep root, and it filled the land. Of course, this metaphor gets carried on into the apostles as well in the New Testament. Most famously, maybe Paul is talking in Romans 2 about the Gentiles being as though they were wild olive branches grafted into the tame olive tree, which is, again, the house of Israel, and partaking of the root of the tree and of the fatness of it. And then most famous to Latter-day Saints, of course, is Zenos's allegory in the Book of Mormon, Jacob chapter 5. I will liken thee, O house of Israel, to a tame olive tree. Okay, and of course, this allegory of Zenos is quite extended, and there's many moving parts. But so salvation is, I should say exaltation. In this metaphorical way of speaking, exaltation means being part of this tree. And part of the tree, like the tree has a long history of producing good and bad fruit from time to time. Eventually, though, the tree gets redeemed, and the tree is good. All the bad parts have been removed, and all the good branches that can be grafted in have been, and they are fruitful on their own branches. Okay, so that is exaltation, but damnation even also is talked about in this kind of arboreal way. Okay, so Malachi 1:1 is famous. Behold, the day cometh that shall burn as an oven, and all the proud, yea, and all that do wickedly shall be stubble. And the day that cometh that shall burn them up, saith the Lord of hosts, that it shall leave them neither root nor branch. So they'll be like stumps, okay, or firewood, basically. Okay, firewood's a good way to put it, right? They're gonna burn in the oven. So, okay, so and I've already mentioned this, right? But what is the tree we're talking about? It is the house of Israel, with all its branches. So there are different views, for certain, about how big the tree is. I'll say different views, but my view, and I think this is supported by the scripture, is that the tree is essentially the Judeo-Christian world. Okay, and that God is working with all of those branches and doing what He can to get them to bear the kind of fruit that He would like. So lots of branches. We have the Book of Mormon, and the Book of Mormon famously to me anyway, this stands out to me, of course, because it fits with my theology. But Nephi, right, and Lehi, they talk about how they are a branch of the house of Israel, broken off, and planted essentially in another part of the Lord's vineyard, right? Nephi says, "Behold, I say unto you that the house of Israel was compared unto an olive tree by the Spirit of the Lord, which was in our father, Lehi. And behold, are we not broken off from the house of Israel? And are we not a branch of the house of Israel?" And of course, this is a rhetorical question. The answer is yes. Which brings up all kinds of interesting questions about what the church is and what constitutes the church, because these people who were in America basically had an entirely independent organization from the church in Jerusalem. And, Nephi and Jeremiah, and later on, Peter and later Nephi, they weren't having secret correlation meetings to run the church or whatever. But they had everything, all the keys and all the authority that they needed to run these branches of the church essentially independently. Of course, the Lord, though, is the common denominator, right? The Lord is the Lord of the vineyard, and so the Lord's running these separate branches. It is easy sometimes to, if you're in an organization that believes that they are the tree and the whole tree, it's easy to think that because trees have a special kind of geometry, or I should say there is a special kind of geometry called fractal geometry. You've heard of fractals before. And fractals are geometric shapes that have a property called self-similarity. That means that you take a small piece of it and it looks like the whole, right? So this is a fern leaf. Actually, the whole thing is a leaf. It looks like each of these parts might be leaves, but the whole thing is a leaf. But just if you just take one part of the leaf and rotate, you can see it's just like a small version of the whole thing. And so it looks like that might as well just be the whole fern leaf there. And when you're sitting on that fern leaf looking at everything around you, it looks like that's the tree. That's the whole tree. But of course the tree is bigger than that. The tree is bigger than you realize, maybe. Okay. Now, there's something else interesting about talking about churches, because we've been talking about families and also about churches, and it's kind of like, which is it, or is it both? There's something very interesting about the organization of the church, like the revealed hierarchy of the church goes like this. There's 3 at the top, and then 12 below that, and then 70, and then there's multitudes beyond that. But if you look at the family, not the church necessarily, but the family, which is these things mesh together at a certain level. But the family of Israel goes like this. It starts with 3 at its head. There's 3. So if you know the Passover song, 3 are the patriarchs. Sung that when I was a child. Anyway, and then below the 3 patriarchs there are 12. And then when Jacob goes into Egypt, there are 70. And then when they're in Egypt, they become a multitude. And so the question is this family structure that's laid out in the Torah, is this pointing us to the church, or is the revealed structure of the church, is that pointing us to the family? And my position is that the revealed structure of the church is actually pointing us to Abraham's family and not the other way around. So it's important to kind of make sure that we have the cart, the horse before the cart, I guess you could say. Okay, so the idea that and the church is teaching us how to be a family. Okay, and I'm talking about whatever church you're in, whatever branch of the church you're in, that it's teaching us about this familial structure and how to be part of the exalted family. Okay, so if this is a family and family is a tree, then how do we grow? How do we grow any tree? Well, there's a couple of ways, right? And how do we grow family? If we're talking about in this metaphorical sense, well, the metaphorical tree, which is a family, is grown the same way any other family is grown. And there's really only 3 ways that families can grow. And if anyone can think of another way, please tell me, but basically there's by birth, which, if we're talking about a tree, this would be the natural growth. And then you could either join a family by marriage or by adoption. And in a gospel metaphorical idea, these would correspond to grafting. And also, these are the 2 kinds of sealings that were restored by the prophet Joseph. Right? Marriage sealings and adoptive sealings. Those are all the ways to join a family. So, as I mentioned, Abraham is key. So, we're going to look for just a little bit into Abraham. Abraham receives a promise, and this promise is repeated, okay? And this promise is repeated to Abraham's children as well, Isaac and then Jacob. And the promise is, now the Lord had said unto Abraham, get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land I will show thee, and I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing, and I will bless them that bless thee, and curse them that curse thee, and in thee all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So I want to focus in on this phrase here, in thee all the families of the earth shall be blessed. As I mentioned, this was repeated. In Genesis 18, it's repeated, except it says, instead of all the families of the earth, it says all the nations of the earth will be blessed. Okay, and in chapter 22, it states that not necessarily Abraham, but Abraham's descendants, right? In Abraham's descendants, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. So some interesting, significant differences there, okay, on the theme. So this phrase, okay, shall be blessed, or shall be blessed, okay, is translated from one Hebrew word, v'nivrachu. Everyone say that, v'nivrachu. V'nivrechu, okay. Within this word, v'nivrechu, is a three-letter root, barak. Okay, it's basically a B and an R and a K, K-H, okay, Bet Resh Chaf. And this root, the root of this word, blessed, literally means knee, okay? So why is it that in Hebrew, knee means blessed? Well, it's an idiomatic use of, it's an idiomatic phrase, okay? An idiomatic use of the word. And where does this come from? It comes from when you kneel before God or before a king. I loved Braxton's prayer earlier. This is the kind of the Hebrew way of praying. Very often when we pray, we ask God to bless us. But Hebrew way of praying is you praise God or bless God. And this is what you do, when you kneel before the king. You say, "O king, live forever," or something along those lines. And so you kneel to bless God and to bless kings. And also there's the idea of, you put a child on your knee to give them a blessing or something like that. And so there's this connection. This is a picture of Robin Hood kneeling before King Richard there, if you were wondering what that illustration was. I thought that was kind of a cool picture. So, okay. So in a literal way of reading this, you could read this, like, if we're, again, speaking literally, "I'll bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee. And in thee all the families of the earth shall be need." Okay, so that sounds kind of weird, of course, but it's an idiom, so idioms don't make sense unless you understand what the idiom is referring to. However, Hebrew is a dense language, and there's a lot of symbolism that's packed into the words and even into the letters. We heard some of that yesterday. So it's very dense and very beautiful. And of course, this is the language of Scripture too, and so it's all the more beautiful because the condensed meanings are gospel meanings. And so that's beautiful on its own. So this phrase, barak, which means knee, it can also be an agricultural term. Okay, and how do we get an agricultural term for that? Because when you graft something, right, you put a nick in the branch or the trunk or whatever, and you insert the graft and wrap it up, and that graft right there, you can see that makes a bend. That's a knee. Okay, in Hebrew that's a knee, but literally it's a graft. So knee is used idiomatically for both blessing and graft. Now this understanding of, I'm going to go back here. This understanding of this promise to Abraham, where it says, "In thee all the families of the earth shall be need," which can, in Hebrew, means blessed, but also means grafted. So, "In thee all the families of the earth shall be grafted." That is an ancient understanding, actually. So this is a passage from the Talmud, and the Talmud is an interesting book, and I don't endorse everything that's in the Talmud, but it does show what ancient Israelites thought about some of the interpretations of these things, and so it's useful to look at that. And so this is a passage from Tractate Yevamot. Rabbi Eliezer said, "What is the meaning of that which is written? And in you shall all the families of the earth be blessed." Genesis 12:3. "The Holy One, blessed be he, said to Abraham, I have two good shoots, brechot, to graft, lehavrik, into you, Ruth the Moabite, the ancestress of the house of David, and Naamah the Ammonite, whose marriage with Solomon led to the ensuing dynasty of the kings of Judah." So Naamah, who was an Ammonite, she was the mother of Rehoboam, so who was the successor of Solomon. So here the ancient rabbis, they're playing with words and drawing interesting connections. You can see these three words that they use, blessed, which we've already talked about, nibrechu or v'nibrechu, right? It has that three-letter root in there. Bet Resh Kaf, which means knee. But shoots or branches, brechot, that also has the same three-letter root in it, and lehavrik, which is like the form of grafting here, also is basically a form of that word. Okay? And as a second witness, we have Rashbam. Rashbam is one of the most famous rabbinical commentators. He lived about 1,000 years ago. But Rashbam on Genesis 12:2, he says, "Will be blessed, nivrchu." This is a term of grafting. That is to say, the families of the earth will be mixed in with your family. This is what God is telling to Abraham. And in so doing, be blessed. So, said it already, but there it is. So with this understanding, this idiomatic understanding, God is saying, among other things, and I will bless them that bless thee, and curse them that curse thee, and in thee all the families of the earth shall be grafted. Now, this is amazing, actually. I mean, there are other maybe interpretations of this. I mean, maybe in thee all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So we just a lot of times I think we think about missionary work or something like that. Like we take the gospel and we, maybe we baptize people, or maybe like Abraham's family is going to, in the future, is going to have a bunch of Nobel Prize winners, which Abraham's family does, and you're going to bless the earth in this way. Abraham's family is going to teach the world about justice and law and about the worth of human beings, and all of this is true. But there is actually a much more literal meaning behind this, and the ancient rabbis picked up on that interesting kind of idiomatic meaning. And surprising, not surprising, our modern revelation has this interpretation is in our scriptures, in the book of Abraham. Okay? My name is Yahavah, and I know the end from the beginning. This is Abraham chapter 2. Therefore my hand shall be over thee, and I will make of thee a great nation. And I will bless thee above measure, and make thy name great among all nations. And thou shalt be a blessing unto thy seed after thee, and in their hands shall they bear this ministry and priesthood unto all nations, and I will bless them through thy name. For as many as receive this gospel shall be called after thy name, and shall be accounted thy seed, and shall rise up and bless thee as their father. In other words, they're going to be part of Abraham's family. That is what the book of Abraham is saying. Bless them that bless thee, curse them that curse thee, and in thee, that is in thy priesthood, and in thy seed, that is thy priesthood, for I give thee unto thee a promise, that this right shall continue in thee, and in thy seed after thee, that is to say, the literal seed, or the seed of the body, shall all the families of the earth be blessed, even with the blessings of the gospel, which are the blessings of salvation, and even of life eternal, so exaltation. Okay? All right. Well, in order for Abraham's tree to be grafted into, that means that there are other trees. Okay? So, and Latter-day Scripture talks about other trees and other lineages, right? So D&C 86, these are just examples. Okay? Therefore, thus saith the Lord unto you, with whom the priesthood hath continued through the lineage of your fathers. For ye are lawful heirs according to the flesh. Okay? And have been hid from the world with Christ in God. Therefore your life and the priesthood have remained, and must needs remain through you and your lineage until the restoration of all things, spoken by the mouths of the holy prophets since the world began. So this was to Joseph and to those early brethren who started the restoration rolling. Okay, they were lawful heirs according to the flesh of the priesthood. They were actual descendants of, as it says in the book of Abraham, that the literal seed of Abraham will carry this right to the priesthood and will carry it to the nations. And so that is reiterated here in Doctrine and Covenants. Abraham chapter 1. Okay, now this king of Egypt, talking about Pharaoh, was a descendant from the loins of Ham, and was partaker of the blood of the Canaanites by birth, and from this descent sprang all the Egyptians, and thus the blood of the Canaanites was preserved in the land, and thus from Ham sprang that race which preserved the curse in the land. So there are other trees. Now, we talk about blessings and cursings sometimes, and I think it's important to know that cursings can be as simple, like cursings don't have to be active, okay, as in like bad stuff is going to happen to you. Cursings can be passive as well, meaning like there's like some privilege or blessing that's just withheld, okay, and you understand what I'm saying here. So anyone know who this is? No, that's Eldred G. Smith. Okay, so
young.
this is a younger picture. He died at, I think he was 106 years old when he died. But he was the patriarch for the church for a long time. He died in April 4th, 2013. Okay. Now in 1979, he was actually released from his position and put into as an emeritus status. And the reasons for that are debated, I guess. But my view is that in 1978, so it was a little less than a year earlier, the church had lifted the priesthood restriction, based on race. And oh boy, I'm halfway. And I think what they realized is if we have a particular lineage that has rights and blessings that other lineages don't, then that makes everyone else cursed in comparison. And so it's kind of a hypocritical thing to say that there is a blessed or privileged lineage at all. So we won't privilege anything nor curse anything. And so he was made emeritus. Like that's my opinion as to why that decision had to be made. Okay, now throughout the scriptures, there are what I refer to in this talk as problematic people. Okay, so I'm going to go through some of them. Problematic according to the things that we all know. I don't need to go into the history why these are problematic people, but the first one, I think, these are roughly chronological, is Egyptus, and there I have in parentheses Zepta, because in the first versions of the book of Abraham, Ham's wife is not Egyptus. That's Ham's daughter. And I think there's a scribal error. Anyway, so Zepta was Ham's wife. She's a descendant of Cain. But despite marrying her, Ham seems to be, according to the scriptures, totally righteous. I mean, he and Zepta are on the ark, like this was for righteous people, okay? In the book of Moses that we have says Noah and his sons hearkened to the Lord, okay? Ham was a follower of the Lord, gave heed, they were called sons of God. And then even more, Moses chapter 8 says Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord, for Noah was a just man and perfect in his generation, and he walked with God, okay? And we all know what that means. As did also his three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So, okay. Of course, then we have Hagar, okay, one of Abraham's wives, mother of Ishmael, and we all know she was an Egyptian. And according to the book of Abraham, Abraham 1:22 says all the Egyptians were descended of Ham and had partaken in the blood of the Canaanites. Okay, although Egyptians are mostly descended from another one of Ham's sons, Mitzrayim. But Abraham was righteous, and their child Ishmael was going to be blessed to become a great nation because he was Abraham's seed. Okay, we have Keturah, is another one of Abraham's wives. The book of Jasher, everyone like the book of Jasher? We love the book of Jasher, it's very interesting. The book of Jasher says she was a Canaanitish woman. Okay, but even though she was a Canaanite, or according to Jasher anyway, okay, she was the mother of Midian, who, the Midianites are descended from, where we get Jethro and Zipporah, which is this is where Moses receives the priesthood. Okay, another Egyptian, Asenath, wife of Joseph in Egypt. She's daughter of Potipharah, the priest of On. On is a place, not a god. And she's, of course, the mother of the tribes of Manasseh and Ephraim. Most of us probably identify with one of those. Okay, we got Shua. This is wife of patriarch Judah. And she is identified as a Canaanite woman. Tamar, also Canaanite. Of course, she becomes the Levirate wife of Judah, kind of reluctantly on his part, and we all know the story there. Okay. Again, famously, we have Moses with his Ethiopian. In the King James says Ethiopian. The Hebrew behind that is Cushite. She is a descendant of Cush, who is one of Ham's sons. There is debate about whether this kind of unnamed woman was actually Zipporah, but Josephus says no, she was actually from Ethiopia, and that Moses married her while he was Prince of Egypt still. And like while he was on a military campaign, Egypt fighting against Ethiopia, that she became enamored with him for his like acts of valor, and they were married. And later, when he leaves Egypt, she comes out and joins the Israelites. And Aaron and Miriam, they complain, of course, but the Lord says, "Don't complain against Moses. He is my special servant." And Miriam especially is punished. We have Zipporah. Okay, maybe we don't usually think of her as problematic, but if you put any stock at all in the book of Jasher, then she is a descendant of Midian, who is a son of Keturah, who was a Canaanite woman. Then we have Rahab. Okay, Canaanite woman, harlot to boot, city of Jericho. She helped the Israelite spies escape. Okay, she marries Salma and becomes the mother of Boaz. Boaz, of course, marries Ruth, and from that comes David and Solomon. Okay, and from that line eventually comes Yeshua. Okay, so Rahab is in the genealogy of Jesus. Ruth as well, we know that story. Makkah, there's actually others. Okay, but Makkah, she was a Philistine woman. Okay, the scriptures say that plainly, and we know that David had no problem taking her as a wife, because in section 132 we say, David, wives and concubines were given unto him of me by the hand of Nathan my servant, right? And in none of these did he sin, except in the case of Bathsheba. So, but the Bible says he married Makkah as well. So now, I listed off a list of problematic people. This is not a full list, and of course, there are apologetic answers to these things. Like, how do we harmonize what the scriptures say with what some of the leaders of the church have said? And a lot of these things seem kind of ad hoc to me. It's just like an excuse for this, an excuse for that. And Rahab was actually a Hebrew. She was actually an Israelite that escaped from Egypt sometime and ended up in Jericho for some reason. And the text doesn't really support this, but maybe there's little clues here and there. I don't know. But all of these problematic people, all right, problematic in quotes. I don't think they're problematic, but I say problematic in quotes. They all have something in common, right? And we all know why these people that I listed are problematic. We all know what they have in common. They are women. Okay. Why does that matter? Okay. It matters because when you read the scriptures, the blessings and cursings are a matter of lineage and not necessarily of race. Okay. Now, we use these terms. Well, we use the term race, I think, differently than ancient people did. Okay. So, and even people in earlier times, in modern times. So this is from Webster's 1828 dictionary. So race there. Race, this is the number one. There are some other definitions that had to do with like dogs and cattle and stuff like that. But the number one definition of race is the lineage of a family or continued series of descendants from a parent who is called the stock. Race is a series of descendants indefinitely. Thus, all mankind are called the race of Adam. The Israelites are the race of Abraham and Jacob. Thus we speak of a race of kings, the race of Clovis or Charlemagne. race of nobles, etc. Okay, so here race is, according to the Webster's, is like the same as lineage. So what is lineage? Webster says race, progeny, descendants in a line from a common progenitor. Okay, what is a progenitor? Progenitor, Latin, means to beget. So in other words, a father. Okay, an ancestor in the direct line, a forefather. Adam was the progenitor of the human race. So Moses and the Ethiopian in Josephus, I didn't mention this, but in Josephus she's actually named. Her name is Tarbis. They may have, we don't have actually, the genealogical records are obviously very sparse in the scriptures. They just list the descendants that are like necessary to carry the story along. But we assume that Moses had children with her, and if they did, they would be mixed race, but not mixed lineage. Their lineage would be Moses's sons. Okay, they are Moses's children, right? And we have this idea in our own Doctrine and Covenants. They become the sons of Moses and of Aaron and the seed of Abraham. Okay. So when a wife marries, and this is scripturally speaking, okay, I'm not saying that we necessarily do this in our modern day and age, although we probably should think about things in a scriptural way, in an Israelite way, if we claim to be Israelites anyway. When a wife marries into a family, she leaves her father's house and joins the house and clan of her husband, and she and her children join in her husband's inheritance. Why is that? Because she's grafted, right, into her husband's house, into her husband's family, her husband's tree. So she and then any natural growth that comes from her, they partake of the root stock. Okay. So there's really only one thing that comes through the mother. That's the baby, literally. Okay, and that's important, obviously. But the rest, the inheritance, the lineage, the blessings, the land that's going to be inherited, okay, the priesthood and cursings too, all that comes from the Father. And this is why the scriptures always say, and as far as I know, they always say the blessings of the fathers, or the lineage of the fathers, or the seed of Abraham, or the seed of Moses, or the sons of Moses, or whatever. They always use this kind of terminology, and they never say the lineage of the mothers, or the blessing of the mothers, as far as I know. Or if they do, it's extremely rare in comparison to this kind of language. This is why scriptural genealogies list almost exclusively men, because when it comes to lineage and inheritance and blessings and priesthood and all of those things, the women don't matter for those things. Okay. So here's an analogy to maybe help you, and this is a scriptural analogy as well. But if I have a seed from a certain plant and I plant it in the soil, what determines the kind of plant? The seed that was planted or the soil that it grows in? The seed. Yes, that is right. Now, some soil, there's different kinds of soils, and they don't all maybe grow as well. And there's interesting discussions that could be had there. But the inheritance of the new plant is from the seed, and seed is the father's contribution. Okay. So, okay, more examples, and these examples get complicated. I'm probably going to run out of time. How much time do I have, Jane?
10 minutes.
10 minutes. Okay. So when the Israelites returned from Babylonian captivity, some of the descendants of the Levites were excluded from the priesthood. And it's actually interesting in Ezra chapter 2, it says the reason they were is, then there's actually some complicated things that are happening here, okay? So, but I'm just pulling out this one example here. It says that they could not show their father's house. In other words, there had been a mixture of Israelites and Babylonians were, of course, a mixture of other things as well. But these people who were coming and saying, we're descendant of Levite, they were actually descended from Levi through their mother and not through their father. And so they would not inherit the Levitical blessings that come from their fathers. They would have their mothers joined Babylonian men, and they're going to inherit the Babylonian promised land, and the Babylonian blessings, and whatever goes along with that. Okay. So they could not show their father's house by genealogy, and so were put from the priesthood. Okay. Interesting, in our own scriptures, Doctrine and Covenants 85, talking about the one mighty and strong to arrange by lot the inheritances of the saints. And again, where do inheritances come from? From the Father. That's right, from the fathers. Saints whose names are found, the names of their fathers, okay, and of their children, okay, and like there's no even mention of mothers, enrolled in the book of the law of God. All they who are not found written in the book of remembrance shall find none inheritance in that day. We just skip down to the next bold part. Shall thou find inheritance among the saints of the Most High? Therefore it shall be done unto them as unto the children of the priests, as will be found recorded in the 2nd chapter and 61st and 2nd verses of Ezra, which we just read. Okay, they did not have a father to inherit it from, and so, like, you can't have someone else's inheritance. You go inherit from your father, wherever that father may be, right? Okay, another example, like we talk about the curse of Cain, okay, but who was Cain's wife? We don't know, and guess what? It doesn't matter, because she did not actually contribute anything. Like, the curse was from Cain, not from her. So we don't know Cain's wife, we don't know Enoch's wife, Irad, Mehujael, Methusael. Lamech we finally do, we know his wives' names. Now you might be thinking, wait, but I remember, like in the book of Abraham, it says that there was a curse that was preserved because of Zepta, or Egyptus. But actually, if you read the book of Abraham carefully, it actually does not say that. Okay, that is something that we assume, and we have kind of read into the text because of our traditions. But in reality, what it says is this king of Egypt, and I read this before, but we'll read it again with new eyes maybe. This king of Egypt, Pharaoh, was a descendant from the loins of Ham. That's what it says. As a partaker of the blood of the Canaanites, as another man, by birth. From this descent sprang all the Egyptians, and thus the blood of the Canaanites, right? Not the blood of Egyptus or Zepta, was preserved in the land. When this woman, so then there's, and you can go read the full thing, but it talks about Egyptus, like discovering the land of Egypt, settled her sons in it, and thus from Ham sprang that race which preserved the curse in the land. So Ham was the one that was cursed, if you believe what Abraham says, okay? Now, the curse of Ham is a kind of a weird story, and I think it's weird because it's strange beyond belief almost. But, we know the story, like Noah's in his tent, Ham does something to him, right? And there's debate about that. I'll talk about that in a minute. Shem and Japheth are good sons, and then, although Ham did something, then Canaan gets cursed, right? We know that story. It's kind of weird, okay? So I'm going to maybe elucidate that a little bit and show why it is that I say that the book of Abraham is correct, that the curse came from the father, Ham, and not from the mother, Zepta. Okay, so Noah's wife that he brought on, the book of Jasher calls her Naamah. She was not Ham's mother. Okay, the book of Moses actually says that Ham was born from a different mother. Noah was 450 years old, begat Japheth, and 42 years later, afterward, he begat Shem, of her who was the mother of Japheth. And when he was 500 years old, he begat Ham. Okay, and it doesn't say, like it specifically says that Japheth and Shem were from the same mother, but Ham is kind of separate. Okay, and the book of Jasher actually corroborates this too. Okay, so there it is. I'm not going to read that for time's sake. But, so that's kind of just a data point that I want you to keep a hold of, okay? So now, the crime of Ham says that he saw the nakedness of his father. And I believe that this has a double meaning. So there's some pictures with a double meaning. So there's actually 2 pictures there, but 4 animals. So on the left picture, who can see a frog? And who can see a horse? And who can see both, maybe? Okay, and then here we have a duck and a rabbit. Okay, a duck and a rabbit. But is both, you can see all four animals now? Okay, you have to look at it a little bit of a different way. Okay, so when the scriptures say he saw the nakedness of his father, I believe that the crime was twofold, but they're using a single description to describe both. So this is pretty cool. Hebrew is pretty awesome. The first was the theft of the garments that were originally given to Adam, and passed down through the patriarchs to Noah. And the legends about this are that these garments contained the scent of Eden, and so the animals would become subdued. Okay, and that Ham actually stole the priesthood garment from his father. Later on, though, and then Ham passes it down to Cush and then to Nimrod. Nimrod's a mighty hunter, right, because he has these garments that make the animals subdued. But then later on, the descendants of Shem, Esau is out hunting. He's a hunter also, and he finds Nimrod out in the field and kills him and takes the garment back. That was his birthright. And then eventually that gets passed down. This is this coat of many colors. Okay, so that's one. The other meaning of this, he saw the nakedness of his father, is actually what the scriptures take. 5 minutes? Okay. What do the scriptures say about this phrase? The scriptures actually define this. It says, the nakedness of thy father's wife, thou shalt not uncover, it is thy father's nakedness. That's in Leviticus 18. Leviticus 20, the man that lieth with his father's wife. Okay, it doesn't say your mother necessarily, because I don't think that Noah's wife, who was on the ark, was Ham's mother, but has uncovered his father's nakedness. So my assertion is that Canaan was not the son of Zephtah, but he was the son of Ham. And you know what I'm saying there, maybe. So in other words, I believe that the twofold sin of Ham was stealing the priesthood garment and raping his father's wife. And that the result of that union was Canaan. And because Ham was cursed for this, then Canaan was cursed likewise. Okay. So we've talked about women. What about men? Of course, men must inherit from their father. Men cannot marry in. Because if there's a marriage that happens, then it's the woman that goes with the man. Like the man doesn't go with the woman. So men must inherit from their father. Men need to be grafted in. I don't have time to talk more about this. But this is a fairly famous diagram, I think, drawn by Orson Hyde, a representation of the kingdom of God. And it is this, it's a tree, right? It's a fractal. It has a fractal geometry. And it's branching. And everywhere that it branches is a son who is grafted in to the tree. So we must all become connected to the exalted tree in one way or another. And the tree is very large, larger than we might realize. And so every year I actually have at the beginning of this book a dedication, and I have not felt to change the dedication. This is it, if you haven't read it. Dedicated to the Lord of the vineyard and to all the restored branches. May you bring forth good fruit in the place you have grown, and may you never forget that it is not given to the branches to decide which should be kept and which pruned. It is the Lord of the vineyard who will declare it. Thank you. Now you may all send me hate mail.
Yes, we have. I still have my tallit on. Okay, good. Can someone hit the lights?
So what holiday is it now? Yeah. St. Patrick's Day. Church Day?
There's a transformation that occurred.
Any questions?
Well, when you change scenes, then you have to change costumes for your new. I'll talk.
Okay. Genesis 28:1, Jacob/Israel is commanded not to marry Canaanite Why is this commandment seemingly ignored in your view? I actually need to pull that up. Let's see. And I'll read the rest of it. In Jasher 73, about verses 30 through 33, Moses remembers this commandment and does not know his Cushite. Okay, so that's interesting. Now, I would have to review in Genesis 28:1, if I remember right. I think this is where Esau has taken Canaanite wives, and his parents kind of admonish Jacob not to do likewise, or at least Jacob doesn't do likewise, and it pleases Isaac and Rebekah. Am I remembering that right? So now a lot of these exceptions they do actually happen before Sinai. Okay, and when the Israelites are given the commandment to go in and destroy the Canaanites. Okay, and so I do think there's a couple of things going on here. One of them, at least, is that I believe the instructions not to marry Canaanites, and also the other non-Israelites, comes from a concern for corruption, not necessarily in corruption in the lineage, because I don't think that is possible, but corruption in the religion. So you see this with this. A prime example of this is Solomon, right? Solomon marries all these wives, and then they corrupt his religion. And if a lot of the admonishments to avoid marrying foreign women, they are immediately connected with some kind of warning saying, like, for they will cause you to turn away from the Lord your God. And so I believe that this is the case. You know, anytime you, and I'm no gardener, but I know that anytime you cut a tree and stick a graft in, there is a distinct possibility for infection and rejection of the graft and disease. And so it can be a dangerous thing, and it's maybe not a normal advisable thing to do, but I think that it has more to do with a worry about religious purity than racial purity. Okay, and I think there's actually more to that has to do with the there is actually, I'll take that back a little bit. I do believe there is some racial concern here, but it has to do with the giants and the blood of the corrupt Nephilim and the Anakim and the Zamzumims and the Ethanims and the who were when Jacob went to Egypt and was there, they were gone 400 years, something like that. That in those 4 centuries, that the evil one knew that the promised land was going to be, that they were going to return and reclaim the promised land, and all the blessings and the promises and the fulfillments of prophecy that come from that, and that while they were gone, then the evil one sowed tares. Okay, and those tares consisted in the Nephilim and their descendants filling the land. And right when the spies go there, they say, the people of the land are giants. We are like grasshoppers to them. And they said, and it's throughout the whole land. The land is full of the Anakim and the descendants of the Nephilim. And it's interesting in the book of Joshua, when they go and they are destroying and cleaning out the land of Canaan, it actually says, this is, you can check, it says when the war is over and when they can rest and start dividing the land, it says when they finally got rid of the giants.
And were they descended from Noah?
Doesn't say, but it does say in Genesis that there were giants in those days
Yeah.
and afterwards, and it doesn't really tell us how they got there afterwards.
They were tall enough that they could.
There are,
They didn't get in.
what was that?
But they wouldn't have come through Noah.
I don't think so. I think there might have been a second planting. I don't know.
Oh,
Noah was the perfect
perfect in his generation.
Perfect in his generations, that's right, which means not contaminated with the rebellious, with the fallen angel blood. Okay. Okay, I'm going to move to the next question. I've already spent too long, probably. Am I running out of time? Genesis 3:15. God put enmity between the serpent and the woman, between his seed and her seed. Why do you think God refers to her seed? If women don't have seed, that is actually what was going to be part of my talk, but it's actually, yeah, it's really interesting because this place right here is basically the only place in the Tanakh where the seed of the woman is actually mentioned. Every other place, the seed, and even like our modern word semen, like meat, is like Latin for seed. Like it's a male thing. But anciently, there were some people believe that the female contribution was blood. Like the men had seed and the woman had blood, and like this was her contribution. It is interesting that there is one place, and I'll tell you why I think this is significant. There is one place where the genealogy of a woman is given. One place that I know of, really. That is in Matthew, the genealogy of Mary. And there is actually a famous Jewish objection to Christianity, and that is using the New Testament prove that David is any relative of, or prove that Jesus is any relative of David. And in the Greek, it doesn't come through very well. But there are Hebrew manuscripts of Matthew that have been discovered actually fairly recently that actually, I think in the King James it says, in the genealogy of Matthew, it basically says, Joseph, husband of Mary, but in the Hebrew it says Joseph,
The male relative.
the father of Mary, father of Miriam. Yes, that's right. So it actually gives her genealogy. And then she, of course, there's a miraculous, a supernatural birth that takes place, and Jesus is not connected to any earthly father, and this would, I think, for ancient people be a problem, but for modern Jews, this is actually ideal, because sometime around 70 to 100 A.D. The Jews stopped doing all the stuff that I was saying, and they changed, and a lot of this has to do with Roman law, because there was wars between Rome and the Jews in around 69 to 70, and then again 100 years later or something with the Bar Kokhba revolt. There was also wars, and the Jews were scattered, and anytime there's wars, there's going to be illegitimate children, and legitimate children too, like as people are spread. But according to Jewish law, if a person of a higher and lower status marry, so if a Roman has a child with a Jewess, then the child is a Jew, not a Roman. See, and but in the Talmud, the tractate dealing with marriage and family and stuff, the law that they write there basically actually mirrors Roman law. It says all these women who have maybe illegitimate children, been forced or raped or taken as captives or whatever, or who have married into Roman families as an act of mercy, we're going to consider them Jews as well. So this is nice because now modern Jews have this idea, and I think that this will, when these Hebrew manuscripts of Matthew become more well known, that this will actually bring Jews to Messiah. So,
Hallelujah.
okay, that's it. Okay. Okay. No, that's okay. That's probably
All
enough.
right, y'all give it up for Joshua.